Well, hey guys, in today's video, I want to talk about how to get fuller eyebrows. It's normal to experience thinning of the brows with age. However, there are a variety of health conditions for which you can have thinning eyebrows, and there are also a variety of skin conditions that come with thinning of the eyebrows, such as atopic dermatitis, certain variants of keratosis pilaris. So my number one tip for getting fuller brows, if you have been noticing that your brows are thinning, especially sudden onset, see your healthcare provider for evaluation, because if there is an underlying medical cause or a primary uncontrolled skin condition that is contributory, well, that needs to be addressed. Otherwise, anything I'm going to talk about in today's video is completely futile. The follicles that make up our brows, they exist in the growing phase for roughly 2 to 4 weeks. The majority of the hair follicles that make up your brows are actually in the telogen phase. So this is the resting phase. They're not actively growing a hair. So set realistic expectations. When it comes to hair growth, nothing happens overnight, and that's certainly the case when it comes to your brows. Now, the other big thing to think about is your nutrition, how your diet is. Specifically, if you are someone who crashed diets, you've lost a lot of weight recently, that can be playing a huge role. It can shift the hair cycles around, including your scalp, but also your brows. Because when we're not getting good nutrition, when we're not taking care of ourselves, or if we are in a scenario where we are under a lot of intense physical or emotional stress, our body is not going to prioritize producing hair. So it shifts more of the follicles into the resting phase, and therefore you experience a mass shedding. So that is something that could be going on, and even if it's not going on, could be smoldering in the background and further making the brow thinning more of an issue. So prioritize good nutrition, eat a balanced diet, okay? A balanced diet, fruits, vegetables, lean proteins, healthy fats, carbohydrates, your favorite treats in moderation. Also, along those lines, make sure you're taking good care of yourself. You're getting good sleep, you're managing other people's expectations of you, you're setting boundaries so that you don't overwhelm yourself with too many commitments and become emotionally taxed, strained, excessively stressed out, burnt out. The next tip is to really think about what cosmetics have you been using to your brows, specifically because it's possible that you may have developed an allergy to something that you're putting on your brow area, and that allergy, that allergic reaction, is not only causing a rash here, but it's also causing hair breakage and thinning of the brows. Next thing to consider when it comes to your brows, you may have to ask a friend or a coworker, especially someone who maybe sees you when you're a little stressed out regularly, because some people, hear me out, absentmindedly pull out their eyebrows. Some people also intentionally pull out their eyebrows as sort of a coping mechanism for stress. It is called trichotillomania. You may have heard of this. People will also do this for the hairs on their scalp, but eyebrows are another location where people do actively pull out their own hair. Some people are not aware that they're doing it, whereas other people are aware and they actively do it as a coping mechanism. Mental health is really important. Seeing a mental health professional can be huge. There is something called habit reversal training, a mode of therapy that can be very helpful. There are medications that may be needed to help control the urge. Another thing, though, that has been shown to be helpful for trichotillomania is N-acetylcysteine. Always discuss any dietary supplement with your healthcare provider, because dietary supplements can interact with other medications and they may be contraindicated for you. But N-acetylcysteine is a dietary supplement that, for whatever reason, seems to be very helpful for trichotillomania as well as skin picking disorder. What can you put in your brows that will actively help them to become thicker and fuller? You've probably heard of people using castor oil and singing the praises of castor oil. Castor oil has a variety of anti-inflammatory compounds, and if you've ever looked at castor oil, used it, you already know. It's very viscous, it's very hydrating, it's very moisturizing, and when you put it on the brow hairs, it coats each hair really nicely. By light scattering, it just makes the brows look thicker. Does it actively grow the brow hairs though? A lot of people swear that it does. You know, a lot of people try this out and they swear up and down that it grew their brows. And there is a little bit of science behind why that might be happening, but unfortunately we just don't have any studies looking at castor oil for brow growth to show that it grows brows, lashes, scalp hair. At the end of the day, it is very moisturizing and hydrating, and it may cut down on brow breakage, which honestly is not an issue for most people, other than if you are dealing with dermatitis in the brow area and you're getting a lot of breakage, that might actually help you out. But be aware that you can develop an allergy to castor oil. It's relatively common in the grand scheme of things that we become allergic to, in which case, remember back to one of my first tips in this video is that things that you put in the brow area that you are allergic to, well, that will actually worsen the brow loss issue for you. So just keep that in mind, that it may make things a little better for you, but it may also make things worse should you develop an allergy to castor oil. You've probably seen brow growth serums on the market. Many of them contain ingredients that are called prostaglandin analogs. I've talked about these in my videos on lash serums. I've talked about these in my video on Latisse. Prostaglandin analogs, like Butaprost, which is what is in prescription Latisse, can grow hair. We don't fully know why that is, but it seems to be perhaps related to telling the hair follicle to get back in the growing phase of the hair cycle. So you have prescription Latisse for lashes, but it can be used off-label in the brow area for brow growth, and we do use it that way for patients who have certain issues, certain health conditions that cause them to lose their brows. For example, chemotherapy. It's been shown to be helpful for getting the brows to come back after chemotherapy. Latisse, that's the prescription one. But when we're talking about stuff that you buy in the store without a prescription, a lot of these brow serums have ingredients that are prostaglandin analogs. They're not Butaprost, but they are very similar and they behave the same way. So great, you know, yes, those in theory can grow the brows thicker and fuller. However, they do have potential for side effects that you may not care for. And unfortunately, the cosmetic products, they don't go over the side effects with you. They don't talk about that, whether it be the brow growth serums or the lash growth serums. And it's really important because I think for a lot of people, they would avoid them altogether if they knew the possible side effects. Whereas for other people, they're like, yeah, I'm willing to give it a try, and I'm fine with that. So what are possible side effects from using either Latisse, aka Butaprost, or one of these cosmetic brow growth serums that has prostaglandin analogs in them? Well, irritation is one of the most common ones. Irritation to the skin, and again, too much irritation can cause hair breakage, so something to keep in mind. But I think what would concern people more so is it can cause hyperpigmentation to the skin. It can actually change the color of your eye. That's especially the case when you're using it for the lashes, right? Like you're putting it much closer than here, but it's still a possibility. You know, stuff can transfer, can migrate, can get closer to your eye, and it's still a possibility. But the thing that really would give most people, I think, pause about using prostaglandin analogs is the theoretical risk of orbital fat loss. This can happen. It's very uncommon, but it can happen. Actually, I say it's uncommon, but given that these compounds are present in cosmetics, for which doctors are not prescribing cosmetics, they're not monitoring patients on cosmetics. So in other words, there's a whole group of people out there who are not being evaluated, who could be developing this and are being missed and flying under the radar. So we really don't know how common it is. All that to say, what happens is you lose fat around the eye, and that can give a sunken eye appearance. Now, as far as we can tell from observing this with the prescription stuff is that it can be reversible. It's reversible once you stop. So it's not necessarily permanent, but nonetheless, it's a very distressing thing to go through. The other thing I want to tell you guys about, though, when it comes to these, is not every lash and brow growth serum on the market actually has these compounds in them. For example, The Ordinary has a lash and brow serum. They don't even market it as a growth serum, just a serum, which I've reviewed on here before. It does not contain these compounds. But other more popular brands like Grande Lash, Grande Brow do. On the screen now, I'm gonna list the names of these compounds. You have to read the ingredients carefully and look for these and decide for yourself if you're willing to assume the risks associated with these of hyperpigmentation, irritation, changing the color of your eye, and potentially periorbital fat loss. It's odd, right? Butaprost is a medication. So if Latisse was ever available over the counter, Latisse would have to label the product with Butaprost called out and tell you, you know, the percentage and everything of that sort. So you would know very easily. But compounds that are like Butaprost, but not Butaprost, these other things in cosmetics, they don't have to do that. So you have to go hunting through the ingredient list to find these ingredients, and you have to know what you're looking for. So that's why I put it up there. The other thing that you might be wondering about is Minoxidil. Sold commonly under the brand name Rogaine. We use it for androgenetic alopecia, for hair growth. It works by getting hairs to get back into the growing phase of the hair cycle. And it can be very effective for hair growth so long as you use it, right? It helps get the hair back in the growing phase, so you have hair regrowth and an improvement in thickness and density. But as soon as you stop using Minoxidil to your scalp, for example, the hair will go back to how it was had you never used Minoxidil. So it's not a cure, but can it be used to the brow bone? Short answer is yes. However, there are a few things that you need to keep in mind. In order for it to encourage hairs to get back in the growing phase, it kind of pushes any of the hairs out that are on their way to being shedding. So you experience an increase in shedding. A lot of people, when they use it in their scalp, they feel like, why is my hair coming out more now that I started using Minoxidil? Well, keep in mind that a greater percentage of your brow follicles are gonna be in that phase to shed out in comparison to your scalp. So it can be pretty striking when you first start noticing it. It's not true hair loss, but just keep that in mind. With consistent use, it can put them in the growing phase. Minoxidil can be very irritating to the skin. Studies comparing Minoxidil for brow growth compared to Butaprost, fewer side effects with Butaprost, aka Latisse, compared to Minoxidil. So it can be pretty irritating. The other side effect that people are not so fond of is while we're trying to get it to grow brows, it can make its way to, you know, this part of your face, here, between your brows, and you'll get hair growth there, which you may not want, right? You might start growing a unibrow. How to minimize that issue? First of all, get yourself a little spoolie brush, clean spoolie brush to apply it, or a Q-tip, a cotton tip applicator. Just apply it a little tiny drop to the brow area. You can buy Minoxidil without a prescription. 5%, 2%. And for the scalp, I always encourage people to go with 5%. But for the brow area, go with 2%. Why? Less likely to be irritating and less of a risk for unwanted hair growth. We see that less with 2%. 2% has been studied for brows, specifically for eyebrow hypotrichosis, which is a fancy name for sparse eyebrows. So it has been studied and shown to be effective for that, less risky for the off-target hair growth that you don't want. The other thing you need to keep in mind, though, when it comes to Minoxidil and its efficacy is not everyone responds to it. Minoxidil is a drug, but in order for it to be functional, the hair follicle has to convert it to its active form. That requires an enzyme called a sulfosyltransferase. Some people either don't have enough of that enzyme or it's just not particularly active, and the minoxidil is kind of a dud in the follicle. Then the last thing you can do, it's not going to give you fuller brows as an improved thickness, but it will fill in your brows, is some sort of tattooing, whether it be microblading, which is kind of like a semi-permanent tattoo, or a full-on tattoo. A word of warning about microblading. With microblading, the pigments are not being placed down in the dermis. So with time, those pigments will be shed and it's not permanent. But one thing that I have noticed people experience since this has become more of a popular thing, the brow color can kind of fade into a strange color. Then you have a frank tattoo. However, the other thing to keep in mind with tattooing, whether it be microblading or a true tattoo, is people can be allergic to the inks, and that can cause a dermatitis. But microblading and tattooing, certainly an option, especially for people who have underlying hair loss conditions where they have developed a scarred follicle. So when it comes to hair loss, you have scarring and non-scarring types of hair loss, and those can likewise affect the hair on your body, including your brows. If you have a scarring hair loss process and it's gone unchecked, untreated, such that the follicle actually scars down, you will never get a hair to grow back there again. So you can't grow a hair in a scarred follicle. Alternatively, you can just do makeup and pencil it in, but presumably you're clicking into this video because you want to avoid that. The last option is to have a brow transplant. You've heard of a hair transplant for hair loss. Well, you can transplant hair from elsewhere on the body into the brow area and get it to grow. Chrissy Teigen, I believe, had this done several years ago, and I did a video about it, and I went into detail in that video about what a brow transplant involves. And so it's certainly an option. Check out that video if you want to learn more. But one of the things that, if you choose to go down that route, if it's right for you after consultation, one thing you'll have to maintain is normal brow hairs are only about 5 centimeters in length. But if the hair has been transplanted from somewhere else where the duration of the growing phase is significantly longer than the duration of the growing phase of brow hairs, well, now those transplanted hairs are going to grow quite long and you're going to have to trim them. So that's something that you have to take into account. But definitely check that video out if you want to learn more. Anyways, guys, that is a wrap up regarding how to get fuller brows. But I cannot emphasize this enough. If you are experiencing thinning brows, loss of the brows, definitely see your healthcare provider. Take it from me, I'm a board certified dermatologist, and when I hear I'm losing my brows, there's a big list of things in the back of my mind that can cause that. And, you know, castor oil or eating a balanced diet are not going to address a lot of these more serious complex issues. So definitely see your healthcare provider to figure out if something else is going on. All right, y'all, if you guys enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and as always, don't forget, sunscreen and subscribe. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Bye.